All right, so one of the things that you can configure here is that certain fields might be required, right? So for instance, I would not want to accept an insert, right, if it doesn't have a username and password. So that makes sense. So you can instead of providing just the data type of the field, right, you can provide additional meta information about that particular field. So for instance, you certainly need to tell me the type. This is just equivalent. This doesn't add anything new, right? You can either use an object for configuration purposes, and that object that configures that field name, it is required that you tell me the type that you want, right? Like type string. But if you do provide an object, you can provide additional configurations, right? Such as required true, right? We can say that this username is required. You need to give me a username. Otherwise, I won't accept the insert. I will fail the insert. Same thing with maybe with the password. Right? It's also a string, and it is required. Other things that you can set here are, for instance, default values. Right? For instance, the date. Notice that it's not being created unless I pass it as an argument. Yes, but what we could do is that, again, we can give it the type, that is the date. And additionally, we can say that the default value for this is, and then here I can provide either a literal value, right, or I can provide a function, right, an initialization function, meaning call this function, right, and that function will provide you with the value of what you should use here for default, right. So here here we're going to use the following function, date.now. Now is a function of the data type date, right? And that function returns the current date, right? System date, right? So what it will do is when it's going to initialize this, instantiate this, is going to call that function and provide an instance of the date object. Okay. Other things, maybe other things you could do here are. You might have, maybe some folks are you might be a user and you might have maybe a star rating, right? So for instance, maybe a rating, and that rating could be a number, right? And that number could have, by default, if you're just starting out, your rating might be 0 or 5. I don't know. We could say that the default value for that rating, right? We can say default 0. Okay. So now, if we try to create a new user, right, so if we log out and if we register as Frank, and we register, there's Frank, and if we look him up in Mongo. There's Frank, and notice that the date created, right? The date created has a default ISO date, right? That has a international string that represents dates. Also notice that the rating is 0, right? As we said that its default value. Okay, make sense? Right. Again, all these things are mongoose. The mongoose library is adding all these things, all these nice little things, validation, defaults. Required, and all those kinds of things.